Uh, Hey students, it's Mr. Lin here. It's about bedtime in the Lin family house, so we're all wearing our PJs here, and my daughter Olivia is going to help me demonstrate how you can set up a sort of a improvised three light studio in your house. It's not going to be the same as what we have at school with the strobe light and the soft boxes and everything, but seeing that some of you guys have to do this from home, I'm just going to ask you to do the best you can, round up whatever resources you have available to you, and try to just play around with light a little bit, basically, and see what you can come up with. So you can Google a three light studio setup and probably get some good information as well. But this is what I came up with, just lamps and stuff I found around the house. So there's three lights, as the setup would. The title would indicate. We got one here. The main light that's brightest is called the key light, and I want you guys to notice how close that is to Olivia's face. None of this indoor light's going to be anywhere as near as bright as the sun outside, so you want to keep these as close as you can, but you don't want the lights in your photo, so most of your photos are going to be probably in this range here. This one I actually have on a dimmer switch. You don't have to do that, but the fill light is typically about half as bright as the key light. So this is the main bright light. The fill light, maybe we'll turn down this, so there's a little bit of shadow on our side. And you can see when I do this how that changes the shadows when I turn it on and off. If you can't do that, don't worry about it. Then the third light, if Olivia kind of scoots aside just a sec, is called the rim light or the hair light. And ideally that would be up above, kind of shining downward, but I don't really have a good way to mount that up there, so she's just going to sit in front of it, and that'll help give a little halo of light around her hair and also separate the subject or your model from the background a little bit. So when you're taking photographs, if you have a model, it's kind of be assertive, give them some instructions. So once you sit up straight, I want you to turn a little bit to the left with your shoulders, and then you can kind of face the camera like that. Turn your head a little bit to the left, and then with your eyes, I want you to look in to the lens there. So the GoPro gives a little distortion when I'm doing this, but what I would do at this point, I'm not going to use my fancy camera or anything, because I assume most of you guys are probably using just your cell phone for your camera at home, and just open up your app that you have for your iPhone or your Android phone, and basically just kind of frame her up. Go ahead and turn a little bit to the left, hon. No, sorry, your right, my left, and with your head and shoulders this way a little bit. Nope, sit in front of the light. There we go. So just with your body, rotate just a little bit this way. There you go. Perfect. So you guys can see, like, this is more challenging, so we haven't done photographs of people before, and you kind of have to work with them and be the director of the show, and your model sort of has to be an actor or actress to a certain extent to kind of work with you. So look in the lens with your eyes, Olivia, instead of behind or at the camera. There you go. No, we're still doing it right now, Owen. We'll let you know when it's your turn. So just kind of have fun with it. Play around with the light. You can use props. I've got my guitar here, so maybe I could do something like that. You can obviously change outfits and things like that, and just see what you can come up with. It's not going to be perfect, but I think if you just are intentional about manipulating the light like this, you can come up with something that looks a little bit better than the typical indoor lighting that's kind of too dark or too light. Ideal thing too is, I don't know if you're able to do this, but if you can set this up so that there's a window at your back, so if the window would be behind me, but the natural light from the sun would be shining in the window onto Olivia, and then you take pictures in the daytime, that would make it even work even better. So I guess just see what you can come up with. Olivia, you can scoot aside. And obviously, guys, if you don't have someone to take pictures of, you can, of course, do some selfies like this, too. And if you hold the camera in such a way that you don't see your arm, people won't even really know that it's a selfie necessarily. So I'll take some shots, see what I can come up with, and then I'll share with you guys how they turned out. All right, do your best. Thanks. Hey guys, I thought I'd just show you a couple of the results I got from the home light studio. In general, looking at them, um, the color of the light's a little warm. So that's something to consider right off the bat. The type of light bulb you use is going to change the look and color of the light. So it might look a little kind of orange or warm to you. So I guess just for example, one of the first things you might want to try to change if you're editing one of these, like this one of my son Owen, for instance. You'll see it's a little on the warm side. So if you come into the editing tools, the first thing I think I would do is adjust that with the warm slider, bring it to the left. It's a little cooler. If the light looks warm, it might not look warm in yours, but that's probably, you can tell it's like a little orangish kind of looking. You can get a similar effect by adjusting the skin tone slider. That'll make it cooler or warmer. And another, real easy way to fix that kind of thing is just to take the color out. So you can take the color out by just desaturating it completely. And that's my preferred way to do it. I know some of you guys have probably seen that. They have kind of these prefab filters like the Eiffel. That one seems way too high contrast to me. This one's called Vogue. It's not too bad. It's not as bad as the Eiffel, but still the contrast a little off, and the Vista one tends to be super high contrast. I'm not a super big fan of these. You can use them though and then dial back the amount that it actually does it. There's only one real reason I use these, and I'll show you in a little bit later. Otherwise, I prefer to kind of make my own decisions instead of just have like a prefab filter do the editing for me. I'm not really into those things personally. They have their purposes, I'm sure, but so I'm going to take that back to the original one. And then you can see if you take the color out just by itself, it tends to preserve the original values a little bit better. And then you can come back in on your own and say, well, I want Owen's hair to be a little darker, so I'm going to add a little black for the contrast there. It's inside, so it's not that light, so maybe I want to bring up the exposure just a little bit, and maybe the whites, some of the highlights in his face could come up a little bit. You can kind of go back and forth to check. And instantly black and white simplifies a photo because it eliminates the variable of color. So I think if the color is off a little bit, like often it would be in an indoor situation like that, like this is a pretty good choice. A lot of times, even though this photo is taken up pretty close, I always just at least experiment with cropping. Usually getting a little closer isn't going to hurt anything. It's just going to bring you a little closer to your subject. Maybe get some of this blanket out of here. Kind of going for, a little bit of that asymmetry, rule of thirds, since Owen's head is tilted this way. He's not looking that way, but his body posture is that way, so you generally want to leave more space in front of the subject than behind. So, I don't know if it's exactly following the rule of thirds. Here's the rule of thirds point, and here's the rule of thirds point, but it still has that kind of more dynamic kind of asymmetry. One thing I didn't mention when I was actually doing the video, is taking the photos, is you probably want to have some kind of a backdrop that's simple, like a sheet, a colored sheet, a black sheet, or a white sheet. I just happen to have these kind of silvery curtains. Unfortunately, they sort of reflected the light, which I find a little bit distracting, so it wasn't really the ideal thing. Alternative, if you can't find like a simple wall backdrop or like a curtain or a sheet or something, if you have one of the newer iPhones with portrait mode, that's not so important. Just make sure you use portrait mode so it blurs the background. That makes it look nice and professional anyway. I know there's also some cool editing features to kind of fiddle with the type of light right on the phone editing options too, which is kind of cool to mess with. Anyway, because of that kind of reflection, I think it's a little bright back there. I might actually add a little vignette and just kind of darkens the corners and kind of subtly brings your focus more towards brings your attention towards the subject. I don't always do that though, because it's easy to overdo. Like some people just like think, well, if some is good, more is better. They'll crank it like this, and then it looks like you're looking down a tunnel. It doesn't look terrible,
But if you overuse that, it gets noticed. It's like, okay, maybe try to use it in such a way that you're doing it, but it's not necessarily noticeable. So I think, as a black and white shot, my son, and this is decent. You can, I won't go through all of the steps I've done with the rest of these. They're kind of similar, so at the risk of being redundant, I'll just kind of skip that. But you can see I've done some in black and white. Um, this one I actually edited on my phone. There's no edits done on Google Photos, but I kind of desaturated a little bit. I thought it looked kind of, I don't know, vintage or just kind of different. This one, I was kind of going for a little bit of drama, so putting some expression. These can add some creativity with the low angle, kind of sort of accentuates that, and then I heighten the contrast a little bit more than it normally would in that one. A lot of these I just went with the black and white because I wasn't super happy with the color of the light. This one of Olivia I did pretty similar to the one of Owen. There's a subtle vignette on that, increase the blacks to bring her hair out. This one I did the thing where I just kind of desaturated it. If you want to see how you can do that in Google, I just took the saturation down. Unfortunately, this one's a little bit blurry. It looks like he was moving or his eyes aren't quite in focus or something there. As you can see, I took the saturation way down, not all the way down, so it just leaves like a little bit of vestige of color. It kind of looks old-fashioned, like it was hand painted or something. It's kind of a neat look. You can try that if you want. Let's see. The last thing I think I was going to show you, I got somewhere I was wearing a cowboy hat. So if you're doing this at home, you have the luxury of being at your house where you have different props and outfits and things like a cowboy hat that you can put on. So this one, I was kind of taking the hat off, got a toothpick in my mouth, kind of looking like I don't know, riding a buffalo bronco or something. Maybe not. One thing you might notice different about this one is it's a little gritty. It's a little more textury. And what I did with that one was I took the color out of it with the saturation and then added this pop slider. I'm very careful with this because I think it's another one that's easy to overdo. It's like, whoa, a little too textury. And another reason you might want to be careful about this, if you have like a zit or something, it'll bring that out even more. So it's maybe not the ideal thing to use all the time. But you can see how it kind of brings my, if I bring it down, you don't see the texture as much, but it kind of brings out the texture of my beard and my skin and the wrinkles and stuff. So it gives it this kind of grungy, gritty look, which I think works well with the cowboy thing. The thing is, if you take the saturation out and you put the pop up, you'll start to see the color come back into it, which is strange. I'm not saying I don't like that, but if you didn't want that to happen, this is coming back to a situation where instead of taking the color out, with the desaturation, this is the one situation where I might actually use one of these things and even just draw it back a little bit so it's not as intense. But then when you come back in and use the pop thing, you notice that the color doesn't come back in. So if you did want to do a black and white thing without, and then add that kind of HDR, kind of grungy, gritty texture with the pop slider, you kind of have to use one of those things if you're editing with Google Photos. But there's a lot of editing software besides Google Photos out there, obviously, that you could experiment with. So I hope you get some decent results with your homemade light studio. Don't forget to try to look for a good background. So let me know if you have any other questions. Look forward to seeing the results you come up with. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you guys do a better job than I did, because I don't think my lighting situation was ideal, but nonetheless, I was happy with the way some of these turned out, and it was fun just being creative with it. So good luck.